Hello, and welcome to Fantasy Writing for Barbarians. I'm John Agroni. I am a published fantasy author with over 10 years of experience as a professional writer and editor. On this podcast, I take a look at usually some advice prompts, questions related to fantasy writing, and I provide my best possible tips on trying to help you navigate the wild and unbelievable journey that can be writing a fantasy novel or novella or short story, whatever you like. Now, usually on the show, the way we start is I take a look at a prompt that I have not seen before. Our producer, Natalia Emmons, sends me a whole list of them, and I'll open it up, read the prompt, and do all that stuff. But Natalia said that she wants to do something a little bit different. And also, on that note, we're going to be having a kind of different format for the show because our other producer, Bridget Surdock, is traveling, and so we're going to do this one without any fact-checking at the end of the show. So that could be terrible. Obviously, because Bridget makes the show so great. But giving them a little bit of a break before we dive into this. And Natalia assures me that this is more of, it's like I don't want to put words in her mouth, but she made it sound like this is not going to be like the typical format for the show. I don't even know what that means, but I guess we're going to find out together. All right, so let's just get into it. Natalia sends this to me from the Fantasy Writers subreddit on reddit.com. Here we go. All right, so this is from user Eve Prague. And Eve Prague writes, feedback on my magic system, high fantasy. And, okay, so this is a critique, my idea. So I see what Natalia wants me to do. Natalia wants me to do a critique. And sure, yeah, that works. I'm usually critiquing stuff anyway, but this could be a fun kind of different thing to do for the show because I could critique based on a topic. In this case, looks like we're going to critique a magic system. And I do love magic systems. I definitely love pointing out magic systems when they go wrong, so that can be fun too. I'm sure a lot of you have probably read a novel where you felt like the magic system was just not quite right or something was off about it. So let's dig into it. Eve writes, so I'm developing a magic system for a book I'm writing. It is a hard magic system that I've been trying to base more in logic and less in color orb go burr. Okay, so by hard magic system, so there's hard magic systems and there are soft magic systems. So for those of you who don't know, quickly I'll explain. A hard magic system is going to be basically a magic system with a lot of defined rules and a lot of limitations that make the magic system, like this person is saying, based, and I don't even want to say logic, but based on an established set of rules that don't easily break. So an example of a hard magic system would be Allomancy in the Mistborn novels. And an example of a soft magic system is going to be something like Gandalf in The Lord of the Rings. It's soft because it just seems like Gandalf can do random, crazy, weird things all the time. And it's not always super understandable or makes a ton of sense. It usually is just Tolkien kind of pulling something out of thin air to make the plot go. But these days, high fantasy tends to defer more to hard fantasy. Sometimes it's a hybrid. Wheel of Time kind of vacillates between hard and soft magic systems. One thing that can be widely misunderstood about hard magic systems and soft ones is that a soft magic system just simply means that you are like kind of changing and adding things to the magic system all the time. That doesn't necessarily make it soft. Because, for example, again, in Mistborn, you do have Allomancy, but Sanderson also has a secondary magic system called Furukami it's also a hard magic system, but it doesn't make the magic system in general for that story soft just because this other thing comes into play, if that makes sense. So anyway, back to Eve's prompt. So Eve wrote, I've been trying to base more in this magic system in logic and less in color orb go burr. No hate to anyone who does that. I do love that stuff. I just wanted to try and create a system for mine. I would love some feedback on how other people would feel about this system. All right, sounds good. This is the system. There are ways you manipulate and manifest magic that is specifically catered to your genetics, and you cannot generally change this. Then there are magical powers that you can gain from multiple ways. Examples are fire, water, earth, arcane, ice, etc. Okay, this sounds a lot like Naruto. So Naruto has something called blood limit abilities. So there are characters who can only have certain abilities because it's genetic to them. And then there are and there's a secondary kind of magic system to Naruto where they also have affinities for different elements. And that kind of plays into their style of, it's called ninjutsu and all that stuff. So yeah, this sounds a lot like Naruto, which is helpful because then we have something we can kind of refer back to here. An example of this in practice would be like follows. A mage that can cover his body in stone. His magical manifestation would be body modification, and his power would be stone. If he got a fire power, he could theoretically become the Human Torch from the Fantastic Four as well. Right, okay, so this also kind of reminds me of Avatar: The Last Airbender, just because there aren't necessarily, like, that is like a hereditary thing, but the secondary ability, I guess, is like the personality of the character in Avatar. So Aang, it's not that he's just an airbender, it's also that his personality is peace-loving. He doesn't want to harm people. So he is more of he like dodges, and he is a bit more flighty. He's, twinkle toes, right? He's more weightless, whereas like a firebender, they have like a certain firebender like Zuko, he's fierce, and he even uses swords at one point with his firebending. So yeah, there are definitely examples of this, but I guess this person is talking about really a more defined magic system than, character traits, I guess. So it is a little different for sure. And again, Naruto is another good example of this, just look at, Naruto has like a special ability. He uses his like fox demon chakra and he mixes it with wind, and it creates a very unique ability that only he can do and all that stuff. So E writes, I do like this system, but I do feel like it does limit my creativity to a degree, because I can't just say they throw up a rock wall and hurl a fireball at blank, since that would require 2 manifestations of magic, so it does require me to put more thought into it. But at the same time, it'll be easier for the reader to rationalize and understand magic in this world a bit easier. Thoughts? So it sounds like the critique that they want, I don't know, this doesn't feel like they're asking for a critique. It sounds like they're just sort of asking for a feedback loop on whether or not their magic system is worth doing, I guess. Because look, if this is a good sign that it takes creativity, that's a really good sign actually, that you're feeling a little bit like, like I have to think about this. The reason that's good is because it means your magic system has layers to it. And it means that in order for it to be compelling, it can have the potential to be compelling. So what I mean is, if you had a magic system that was a little bit more kind of derivative and, look, it does remind of other things, but it doesn't necessarily mean it's derivative, to be totally fair to this magic system. But what I'm saying is that you've added complexities to it just enough to give yourself room to think of interesting, creative things. Another example of this would probably be Mashal. That is an anime, really fun anime, where the main character can't use magic, and he's kind of in a Hogwarts setting. It's very comedy, but the magic that the characters use typically is like a combination of things. They're basically the type of wands that they use. There are these like master arcane wands, and then the magic that's sort of genetic to them. And so what makes the character like more interesting or original, it's like, it's not just a character who can transfer their pain to another person. It's also a character who can heal really fast in like a combo to that because of the type of wand that they have. And so the reason that makes that magic system so interesting is because with combos, you have so many different possibilities. So if you are feeling a little bit like, I don't know if I should do this magic system because then, what does the fodder do? Then I would take a look at maybe something like, and what I mean is like, so you have characters who maybe have these combos. So then what if you have like an army of these characters, or you have like a squad or something? How do you keep coming up with all this stuff? Another helpful thing, a note from Mistborn, again, would be to separate characters who can use the magic system at its fullest versus characters who can only use a fragment of it. This is a neat little trick because what it will do is it'll add some heft to the characters who can do these combos. It gives them tension. It gives them a little bit of like, ooh, they're for real. And then you can have your fodder who can only do maybe a fragment of that type of magic. So again, looking at Mistborn. A Mistborn is somebody who can use all the different things of allomancy. So all the different, basically it's metal bending in terms of, they can push and pull, they have better senses and all this stuff. Versus there are characters in those novels who cannot do, not everybody's a Mistborn, they're Mistings. So they can do some things, like they can maybe have one aspect of allomancy, but they can't do a bunch of them at the same time. And so that makes it a little bit more special that the main character can do these things. And their opponents, when their opponent is a Mistborn, it makes it more exciting. Versus if everybody's a Mistborn, how do you make your main character stand out, right? With Naruto, the way that Naruto handles this is not everybody has the genetic abilities. There are just a lot of ninja in that anime/manga who maybe can only do like the basic, like there are basic ninjutsu things that everybody can do. And then there are special ninja who come from a bloodline of people who like, oh, they can use like the Sharingan. It's the special eye power where they can, copy moves and like see, behind the physical world and stuff like that. But not everybody can do that. And so it makes it a world that still feels like big and enveloping and inviting, but it also makes it so that you have characters who, you can have a real challenge if you go up against a squad of like basic magic users versus like the fully realized ones. So that's a start, at least in terms of like your combos. Another helpful thing to do is to write out all your different combos. Have a list of like, what are some exciting things, and let these things come to you organically when you're going about your day. So if you think of something, just observing out in nature, like a bird falling on a branch, maybe that inspires like a type of magic for you that you could turn into a combo later. If you have a database of this, you keep track of it, you're going to feel a little bit less overwhelmed. But even then, if you're still in this place where you're like, I don't know, like I don't want to keep hitting a brick wall, maybe literally with these powers, then another thing is to always, like I was saying with Avatar, relate it to a character's personality. Try to use the character's personality to inform what kind of magic and power and everything makes sense for them. And there should also be a cost, right? There's always a cost to magic in some sense if it's done well, because the cost is going to really help the reader not feel like, oh, the main character just wins all the time. Really, you have like a lot of options here. And even if you look like at Gandalf, well, Gandalf doesn't have necessarily a cost. I mean, I kind of forget if he does, but the cost with Gandalf is more actually to the main characters. You have this character who can do all these amazing things, but the cost is that the main character becomes too reliant on this all-powerful wizard. So when he, goes away because of the Balrog, all of a sudden the hobbits are on their own. The all-powerful thing that kept protecting them and made them feel safe is gone. That serves the story. There is a cost, and the cost is that, well, what do you do when you don't have that power anymore? You're stuck, right? With Naruto, the cost is basic. It's chakra. You have a limit on how much chakra you can do, and the main character, his struggle is that because he has this demon sealed inside of him, he can't control his chakra very well. He has the innate ability to do these amazing things, but he can't control it because of circumstances that are outside of his control. In terms of his birth and like his destiny and all that stuff. And again, though, the reason Naruto works so well, especially in those early episodes, is because that isolation the main character feels is a result of the magic system. And it makes the magic system more compelling because it doesn't just feel like an add-on to the story. It feels like it's part of the story. Naruto, the main thing with Naruto is that he wants to make friends, he wants to fit in and belong. He's been alone his whole life. But he feels like because he can't be a great ninja as easily as everybody else, he's alone, right? And the whole point of the story is that as he starts to find his own strength and figure out what he can do, at the same time, he is also developing meaningful relationships and friendships that drive him even beyond raw power. And so that's the basis of that story. The magic system serves the story. You probably noticed in a lot of other things, anime, books, and whatever, sometimes the magic system starts to fade away because the author loses sight of this and they start to maybe just think less about how the magic system affects the main character and think more about the external stakes and bigger challenges. And there are a lot of stories that falter in that respect. And you don't want that to happen to you. You always want the magic system to be an extension of the story because it's just a better way to write a story, quite honestly, because it makes the magic system feel intrinsic to the world. The latest novel I've been working on is very much like this because the main character is a fortune teller. And her main issue is that, what can a fortune teller do, right? They can see the future. But the big cost to seeing the future is that the more and more you try to cheat the universe, the more the universe retaliates with bigger and bigger calamities and causing problems and exposing the main character to threats because they can't hide if they are constantly, cheating the universe. So I found a way to incorporate the magic system. It gives her an advantage, but it's an advantage she can't easily use. It's an advantage that she has to struggle to rein in at times because it can also put her in danger. That's conflict. If I can't do this because then this will happen, or I have to do this even though this will happen, and that drives me bananas. It's that kind of thing. All right, so let's take a look at some of these comments and see what other people have to say. We have one here from Akavan, and they write, first off, what you describe isn't much of a system if systematic approach is what you are going for. Not that it's a problem, quite the opposite in fact. Most works do not need an overdeveloped system of magic. But you mention a system in your title. What are the possible types of manifestation, and what decides which elements somebody gets access to? And what exact abilities, for a lack of a better word, correlate with each combination? So they're critiquing this one thing. His magical manifestation would be body modification, and his power would be stone. So far, so good. Does this serve the needs of your story? I can't just say they throw up a rock wall and hurl a fireball at, since they would require 2 manifestations of magic. And do you want to be able to do that? Then clearly there is a dissonance here. It'll be easier for the reader to rationalize and understand magic in this world a bit easier. Well, if your readers expect to have a very game-like system that is mostly focused on direct combat, then it certainly would. If you want them to rationalize it from a realistic standpoint, then you might want to focus on how the magic affects the culture, society, politics, economics, and spirituality of your characters and the respective countries, nations, tribes, what have you. Not that you have to go in depth on every aspect, of course, but even some broad sweeping strokes would make your world feel much more plausible and lived in. I think though, so the reason I didn't say anything like this is because Eve didn't, describe their world. So, we're kind of assuming that they haven't given this thought. And I didn't want to make that assumption because I think that they are starting with the magic system in this case. And I do think it's the right advice to be like, all right, like I was saying, like, how does the magic system affect the story? Because if you look at the first part of the prompt, they say, I'm developing a magic system for a book I'm writing. So they are writing this book. And it sounds like they do have the story in mind. So a great reminder to be like, okay, you're writing the book, and we can maybe assume that the magic system is organically coming from the story that they're writing. I want to assume that. But if that's not the case, Eve, then yeah, you may want to revisit that and make sure that that's the case and follow, of course, the advice to ensure that your magic system does feel like an extension of the world itself, and that, if there's a whole realm here where it's like all these people are fire users, but they have different body modifications, or maybe this is a tribe of all people with body modifications, but, they have different elements. That's not super clear to us because you kind of gave more vague details, and that's fine. But yeah, I think though this first thing about, the magic system, I think that it is a system. They're saying like, oh, what you describe isn't much of a system if systematic approach is what you're going for. Yeah, I mean, I agree that this doesn't need to be overdeveloped. It doesn't need to be overly complex. It can just kind of start with a set of rules that you try to follow. But it does, I don't know. I think that sometimes writers can run into this trap of overthinking their magic system and trying to come up with an explanation for every little thing. Well, these people all do this, or, the fire is because their blood vessels are combusting in an extremely fast. At a certain point, when you try to overly explain like that, it actually becomes less plausible, because then it's like, well, wait, how would blood vessels do that? Like, that doesn't make any, like, how would a blood cell be able to? So what you want to do is you kind of want to focus on techniques to make your magic system original without making it needlessly scientific. Scientific magic systems work a lot better, first of all, in sci-fi, but also they work a lot better with people who are more science-minded, who maybe have a better attention to these, like the physics of everything, and they just have an affinity for that. And if that's not the case for you, Eve, then you may want to shy away from that, which it sounds like you probably already are doing. So yeah, there's a lot of different things you can do. There are a lot of different things you can, incorporate into a magic system to make it stand out. But again, ultimately, people aren't going to recommend your book just based on your magic system alone. You can have a book with an awesome magic system that's really cool, unique, and original. But if it doesn't have the right characters, if it doesn't have the right kind of immersive setting, if it doesn't have a really good gut emotional appeal, and just, man, that read was really good. I really felt something unique. then your magic system is going to just sort of be an accessory to something a bit hollow. And so you don't want that, of course. And obviously, I think that, you're on the right track in terms of like trying to come up with ideas. But again, if it's feeling overwhelming, do not take that as a sign that you're doing something wrong. Take it as a sign that you are onto something that can be deep, complex, and memorable. That's the main thing. You want people to remember your magic system. You don't want it to just sort of be basic, right? I've been a huge culprit of basic magic systems. I'm more of a soft magic system kind of guy, to be personally honest. I don't love, ultra defining them. Even the ones where I do have like a set of rules, I typically do the hybrid approach where it can just feel a little arbitrary at times, but that's okay too. Okay, so that'll do it. And again, hopefully I didn't say anything too wrong here because we don't have our fact checker helping us out. But hopefully that was helpful all the same. And with that, I'm going to get out of here. Thanks so much for listening to Fantasy Writing for Barbarians. Thank you so much to our producer, Natalia Emmons, and our other producer, Bridget Surdock, for always making the show so great. And I'm also eager to do more of these. I think critiquing magic systems can be a lot of fun, or critiquing general topics could be a fun format for the show as well. If you have your own advice prompt or something you want me to critique in general, you can always email us. We have an email, fantasywritingforbarbarians@gmail.com. You can also join our Discord and hang out with us there. If you have anything that you want to reach out about or chat with me about, it's the In Between Drafts Discord, linked in the show notes, of course, along with the email. All right, thanks so much for listening. See you all in the next one. Bye-bye.